Hi friends, David here from Learn Christmas Lighting, and in today's video we're going to talk all about labeling your controller boxes. Because building these things, yes, it's important to build them. Yes, it's important to do a great job. Yes, it's important to lay them out well. But when you have a small army of cable guard boxes and receiver boards and things like that, labeling becomes even more important for your show. Okay, so I'm going to talk about in this video what to label, what not to label, very important, and ultimately how this is going to help you have a much less stressful display setup and just a better time overall. So if you like this, be sure to subscribe here and like the video, and let's dive in. So labels. What do you need to label when it comes to a Pixel controller? I would argue a couple things. Okay, first, there's going to be a difference between regular controllers that have brains, controllers that are thinking, and boxes that are purely receivers. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. For a controller that has brains, what I like to do is I like to go ahead and on the outside, I like to put the IP address and I like to put the letter of the controller. I use letters for my controllers. It comes from my time in the stage lighting industry, which, I mean, I'm still in that industry. But because if you number controllers, that just gets confusing. Because now you've got controller 1, and then you've got all your outputs on that controller, which are also numbers, right? If you use a letter for your controller, now you can do 26 controllers. And then when you finish that up, you can go AA, BB, etc. Now you've doubled, tripled, whatever. You just keep going. Okay. So I like to letter every controller, name it in X-Lights, and also on the controller itself. Okay, with that letter code, and then you'll be good to go. All right. I'm also going to put on the outside of the box the IP address of that controller. I like to set up all my controllers with static IP addresses. I talk about that in my courses and in Learn Christmas Lighting Academy, which, if you're watching this in real time, closes on the last day of June, which is either today or tomorrow. And so I like to set up static IP addresses, and I want to put that on my controller box. Why? Well, if I'm out in my yard, I've powered things up and I'm working through things and I see a configuration issue, or I want to access FPP on one of my Culps or something like that, then all I have to do is enter that, hop on my phone, enter that IP address if I'm on the show network, and then I'm good to go. If I don't have that IP address on the outside, it's no good. Also, if for some reason I swap out an SD card or a controller dies and I have to swap that out, I don't have to go back, find my controller in X-Lights, look at a spreadsheet. I don't have to do any of that to set up my new controller, right? I can just transfer the SD card or the controller, put in a new controller, if it's the Falcon or something. And if the IP address isn't already set, I can just go in on the menu with the buttons on the controller, set the IP address to where it's supposed to be, and plug it in to the network, be ready to roll. Of course, that exact process is going to vary by controller, but you get the idea. Okay, so IP address and label of the number. What do I use to make these? Good question. These are a waterproof label from my label maker. Grab that a second. Label maker I use is the Dymo Rhino 4200. It's a really nice label maker, but they're only like $100, okay? What I like about these, we'll talk about this in a minute, is it can do cable labels that go around the cables. It can also do regular labels, and a lot of the labels you buy for it are waterproof. I've bought the non-branded labels, the third party, from eBay or Amazon. They work fine. Are they as good as the Dymo brand labels? No, but they're good enough for my needs, right? The biggest thing about the Rhino is if you buy it in kit form, instead of just the label maker, but in kit, again, usually around $100, a little more, it comes with a rechargeable battery and a power cord that plugs in here. I can go all day long making labels and not have to charge this thing. Or maybe I plug it in and keep using it at some point. This thing is awesome. Also, when you're looking for a label maker, make sure the keyboard on it is a regular QWERTY keyboard, like your computer. Okay, some label makers have an A, B, C, D, E, alphabetical order keyboard, which is the hardest thing in the world to type on because that's not what we're used to. Let me get off my soapbox there. Okay, so that's the outside of the controller. Pretty much any waterproof label will work. Some people will use the printable like Avery labels, but they're not waterproof, and these go outside, so that's not the best idea. Okay, next thing we gotta label are our pigtails, right? So they come out of the box right here, right? They come out of the box. At the end of the pigtail, I like to have a label. There's no labels on these, David. What are you doing? Good question. So this one I just built the other day. I don't have them labeled. There's actually even only 2 pigtails out of 8 hooked up. But on my other boxes, I have them labeled, okay? There's a couple options for different labels. This is one of them. This is the Dymo Rhino label. This is a 3/4 inch cable label that I printed on this label maker. These ones over here, and I'll make sure I get a close-up, are an electrician type label. Okay, they come from the Klein book, the Book of Klein. And the Book of Klein is like $5. You can get them on Amazon. And they're pre-printed numbers. 1 through 48 is the default one, but they have other ones available too. And these are a waterproof label, UV, whatever, I don't know. You can use them outside. They last a while. And they just wrap around the cable, and then you've got a label on there. Completely pre-printed. They're well built. And so if you don't want to invest in a label maker, these are super cheap, and they work well, and a number of my controllers have them. Okay? Last is if you want some really nice labels that are pre-printed, especially if you have mixed voltages in your show, go look at our pixel vendors like Wired Watts, and I know others have these as well. They offer pre-printed labels that also indicate the voltage and or are color-coded, okay? And so the cool thing about that is you get a really nice waterproof label, just peel it off, stick it around your pigtails and your other controller bits, and then you're ready to rock and roll. And if you have like 12 volt and 5 volt stuff, it will indicate that on the label so you don't mess things up and fry your lights, though I would use different plugs if I was doing that. So, what do you not label? Good question. You'll notice here, this is a receiver box, and you may have seen me moving it around. This smart receiver box, I don't have a label on. And in fact, I have multiple of these, and none of them are labeled. Why? Well, if it's a receiver box, really all you need to label on it is anything that's important. So going forward, my standard receiver box in my home show is a box that has 2 smart receivers in it, 8 outputs. The smart receivers are A and B, and a Ethernet. They're all the same with all my new stuff that I built, okay? And so I don't have to worry about putting the same controller box in the same location for those receivers because all my receiver boxes are the same. So I don't label those with a letter code. Of course, on those, I label my pigtails 1 through 8. But then, when I'm drawing out my show and I label things on that, I just know receiver goes here, outputs 1 through 8, done, and I know where to plug that in on my main controller, my Cobra, my Falcon, and then I'm good to go. I don't need to label this one individually. So anything that's the same throughout your show that's consistent in different locations, like a bunch of smart receiver boxes, there's really no need to label those. And there's no need to be super consistent and get the same box in the same place every time, because ultimately it doesn't matter. And if it doesn't matter, then don't worry about it, right? It makes your setup easier, especially if you're using friends and family to help you. Awesome. If you enjoyed this video on labeling your controller box, then be sure to subscribe here. Check out what we've got in the Academy over at LearnChristmasLighting.com. And if you're new, grab your free guide, 3 things you need to know before you do any Christmas lighting, over at LearnChristmasLighting.com. Thanks so much. Have a great day and Merry Christmas.